Welcome to the channel and welcome to my review of Codex Thousand Suns for games of 8th edition Warhammer 40k, the first standalone codex for the Thousand Suns. It's available from pre-order from Games Workshop on the 27th of January and it goes up on sale on the 3rd of February. A special thank you to Games Workshop for sending this through to me and other members of the community so we can make videos like this and get the information out there. Obviously we can't show you any data sheets in here, otherwise these kind of videos will stop. So let's jump straight in. What to expect from Codex Thousand Suns? Well, the first thing to shout about is it's laid out very similar, pretty much exactly the same way as the Death Guard Codex. This codex consists of Chaos Space Marines and Demons, and of course some specific units that are only available to Thousand Suns, such as Rubik Marines and Magnus the Red. So essentially, it's a bit like having 3 codexes in one. You've got some of the Chaos Space Marine stuff in here, Defilers, Land Raiders, things like that. You've got Zangors and Magnus the Red, specific things for the Thousand Suns. And then you've got a plethora of all the Tzeentch Demon units in here as well. The Tzeentch Demon units do not have the Thousand Suns keyword, just as in the Death Guard Codex. The Nurgle units in there don't have the Death Guard keyword. So if you want to build a battle-forged army and take full advantage to the rules in this book, then you're going to need to build more than one detachment if you bring in demons. You're going to bring in all the Chaos Space Marine and Thousand Suns stuff that has the Thousand Suns keyword, and you're probably going to bring in another detachment solely consisting of demons that doesn't have the Thousand Suns keyword, because for example, if you mix your horrors as troop choices in your Thousand Suns list, then they won't share the Thousand Suns keyword, and you'll lose some of the benefits for having battle-forged armies that share exactly the same keyword. So before we jump into all the units and all the rules, a quick touch of the narrative, because it's quite good. They deal with the burning of Prospero. They talk about the rubric of Ahriman. They talk about the planet of sorcerers itself and the cults of the Thousand Suns. There's plenty of narrative for people to sink their teeth into. The timeline brings us right up to date and touches on events that happened in the fall of Cadia. For those of you that didn't read it, in that trilogy at the end, you've got Guilliman making his way back towards Terra, and the Ynnari and Yrane herself help out. And there's a battle in the webway between all sorts of nasties, and the Thousand Suns pop up, and Ahriman is doing his thing. So Yrane turns a bunch of Thousand Suns, restores them from the rubric, the All is Dust. He makes them mortal again. And what's really interesting about that narrative in the Fall of Cadia book is when she makes them mortal again, when she restores them from the rubric, they're not the Thousand Suns, they're not heretic Astartes as we would know them now. They remember Ahriman from 10,000 years ago. Essentially, these Thousand Suns who are restored from the rubric are still good. They're loyal sons of the Imperium, I guess, maybe. And yeah, so Ahriman now knows this and is setting his sights on the Dark City, the Drukhari, the Cormorant, and it touches on events around that, which is, it's nice. It's very concise. It's good. As a bit of a narrative junkie, it's interesting to think about whether Magnus really wants what he's seeking. Imagine if he does manage to heal a bunch of Thousand Suns from the rubric and returns them to flesh, restores them. Will these guys like him after 10,000 years of fighting for chaos and fighting for Tzeentch? It's an interesting question. Anyway, let's dive into the rules. Warriors of Lost Prospero. So there's 2 key abilities in this book that it mentions right at the very start, and one is Death to the False Emperor. That's the same as in all the Chaos books. Basically, exploding dice on a 6 in close combat. And there's the rule about demonic ritual, copy and pasted here as well. Then you flick past all the units entries and you go to the Sons of Magnus. Now the Sons of Magnus have specific abilities that only apply to battle-forged detachments consisting of units only with a Thousand Suns keyword, so you can't put any demons in these detachments if you want these abilities. And the first one is Brotherhood of Sorcerers, and the ranges of all psychic powers manifested with units with this ability are increased by 6 inches. Now, that's quite important because in this book there are 18 psychic powers. There's 6 on the discipline of change, 6 in the Dark Hereticus discipline, and 6 in the discipline of Tzeentch discipline. And Dark Hereticus and the Tzeentch discipline we know from other books. But the range of all the psychic powers that you would manifest there are increased by 6 if you bring Thousand Suns, Inner Soul Detachment, Battle Force Detachment. You also get Disciples of Tzeentch, and a unit with this ability that is within range of an objective marker, as specified in the mission, controls the objective marker, even if there are more enemy models within range of that objective marker. It's objective secured. So the Brotherhood of Sorcerers, the extra 6-inch range only applies to Psykers in Thousand Suns Detachment, and the Disciples of Tzeentch applies to any troops units in Thousand Suns Detachment, and troops are Rubric Marines, Zangors, Chaos Cultists, and Horrors, but the Horrors don't have the Thousand Suns keyword. Those are your 4 troop choices: Horrors, Zangors, Cultists, and Rubric Marines. Whereas Horrors don't have the Thousand Suns keyword, Rubric Marines, Zangors, and Chaos Cultists do, so they will get objective secured. Okay, now I want to jump to the psychic powers. We have the Discipline of Change, which are psychic powers unique to Thousand Suns. And all Thousand Suns sorcerers, exalted sorcerers, Ahriman, people like that have access to the Discipline of Change. Magnus, essentially, if you have the Thousand Suns keyword, you have access to the Discipline of Change psychic powers. But Thousand Suns sorcerers, all those I listed, can also draw from the Dark Hereticus discipline, which is copy and pasted essentially from the Chaos Space Marine book. So sorcerers, Ahriman, people like that have access to 12 psychic powers. They can take up to 6. They pick from 6 from the Discipline of Change and pick from 6 from the Dark Hereticus discipline. And we know that there's a couple of really good ones in the Dark Hereticus discipline, such as Hex, where you throw it out. It's got a 12-inch range, and you throw it out on an enemy unit, and they cannot take invulnerable saves. Remember, if you have a battle forged army, you could then throw that out 18 inches range because you've got that what's it called? Brotherhood of Sorcerers rule. The ranges of all psychic powers manifested by units with this ability are increased by 6. So you've got Death Hex, which we know is good. You've also got Warp Time, which allows you to do another move if you want to. So they've got 12 psychic powers to pick from, and 2 in the Dark Hereticus discipline are awesome already, and then you've got 6 new ones in the Discipline of Change. Then there's the third psychic power list thing, which is called the Disciplines of Tzeentch, and the Discipline of Tzeentch are cut and pasted from the Chaos Demons book. Now, as far as I can see, the only people who can take abilities from the Discipline of Tzeentch, psychic powers from the Discipline of Tzeentch, are Demon Princes and Magnus. They can pick from the Discipline of Change, Dark Hereticus, and the Discipline of Tzeentch. They can take their pick from up to 18 different psychic powers. And then you have the Zangors in here. You have a Zangor Shaman, which is a new elite choice, and he can only pick from the Discipline of Change psychic list. Long story short, lots of different psychic powers. Make sure you read the unit entry to see which psychic powers they can pick from, which chart they can pick from. Thousand Suns, Discipline of Change, and the Chaos Space Marine stuff. The Demon and Magnus can pick from all 3. Zangors, only Discipline of Change. I'll not go through the psychic powers in the Dark Hereticus discipline or the Discipline of Tzeentch because they're available in other forms in other books, and you probably know all about them already. But what I will dive into is the Discipline of Change. So let's have a look at these 6 new psychic powers. We have Tzeentch's Firestorm, which has a warp charge of 7, and if manifested, select an enemy unit that was within 18 inches of the psyker and visible to them. You roll 9 dice, and the enemy unit selected suffers a mortal wound for each roll of a 6. You have Boon of Mutation. This is also a warp charge value of 7. And you select a friendly Thousand Suns character, but not a demon, within 3 inches of the psyker. A demon character within 3 inches of the psyker. And you roll 2d6 and consult the chart on the Boon of Tzeentch stratagem to see which effect this power has on that character for the rest of the game. So the boons of mutation that exist in other books, normally you spend a command point for it, but here if you want to, you can cast a psychic power and get it for free without spending the necessary stratagem point, command point, that's what I want to say. And the boon of Tzeentch stratagem is the same or very similar to the other boons that you get in other books. So if you roll Snake Eyes, you turn into a Spawn. If you roll double sixes, you turn into a Demon. And then there's all the combinations in between. So add 1 to any psychic test you take for the character, or +1 toughness, or add 1 to the damage characteristics, or add 3 for the character's move characteristics. So you might want to cast a psychic power on someone and get that free boon, and then only spend a command point if you roll Snake Eyes or Boxcars to re-roll it. It's a chance to pimp your characters for free. I quite like it, actually. There's many times when I've been casting psychic powers here, there, and everywhere, and there's one sorcerer left or one librarian left, and you've cast all the other powers that you wanted to cast, and you think, well, what can I cast with him? Well, maybe having Boon of Mutation in the Discipline of Change psychic powers is a very useful thing to have. Remember, if you're running Thousand Suns, i.e. lots of sorcerers, lots of exalted sorcerers, you've probably got a good handful of sorcerers on the table doing their thing. And so giving a couple of them, or allowing a couple of them to know Boon of Mutation as their secondary psychic power, and throwing it out here, there, and everywhere, is probably a very viable tactic. Yes, you might have to spend the old command point every now and then if you do a spawn thing, but it's good. And essentially you could cast Boon of Mutation on yourself as well, right? Select a Thousand Suns character within 3 inches of the Psyker, that would include the Psyker, and cast it on himself and give him an extra move, extra toughness, extra attack, or extra something or other. A useful little ability, particularly in a list, in a army that has lots and lots of Psykers in it. Number 3 is Glamour of Tzeentch. Again, warp charge value of 7. Select a friendly Thousand Sun unit within 12 inches of the Psyker. Remember, this will go out an extra 6 inches. All of these abilities will be plus 6 inches with the Brotherhood of Psykers rule. Until the start of your next psychic phase, your opponent must subtract 1 from any hit rolls they make for models that target that unit. So it's -1 to hit in the fight phase, in the shooting phase, and you got a 12-inch range on that, or 18-inch range if you're battle forged. Warp charge value of 7. There's one called Miasma of Pestilence that the Death Guard get, and it is very useful, and I do it all the time. So Glamour of Tzeentch is going to be a go-to psychic power. Doombolt, warp charge value of 9. That's very high. Select an enemy unit that's within 18 inches and visible. So again, could go up to 24 inches. That unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, and in their following movement phase, they must halve their movement characteristic and cannot advance. So that's a long way to throw out D3 mortal wounds, and halving something's movement phase, particularly if it's a fast unit, slowing it down, that's going to be nice. Temporal Manipulation, warp charge 6. If manifested, select a friendly Thousand Suns model within 12 inches of the Psyker. That model immediately heals D3 wounds. So you want to heal Magnus. You want to put D3 wounds back on Magnus for a warp charge value of 6. Boom, you can do it. If you want to heal your Defiler, or if you want to heal your Chaos Predator, if you want to heal a vehicle, you could throw this on a vehicle as well. Heal D3 wounds. You can throw it on yourself. Say Magnus has this ability, then he can put it on himself, the ability to heal D3 wounds. This will be an auto take. And then Weaver of Fates has also got a warp charge value of 6. Select a Thousand Suns unit within 18 inches of the Psyker, and until the start of your next psychic phase, the invulnerable save of that unit is improved by 1 to a maximum of 3 up, and models that do not have an invulnerable save gain a 4+ invulnerable save. So Magnus has a 4 up invulnerable save as standard. You chuck this on him, he's got a 3 up invulnerable save. Scarab Occult Terminators come with a 5 up invulnerable save. Chuck this on them, they have a 4 up invulnerable save. Araman's got a 4-up, chuck this on him. Araman will have a 3-up invulnerable save. So temporal manipulation and Weaver of Fates is going to be coming all the time. I would definitely be bringing Boon of Mutation as well for free upgrades for my stuff. And that's the Discipline of Change psychic powers. Add those to Death Hex and Warp Time and Prescience from the Dark Hereticus discipline, and suddenly you have a huge toolbox of psychic shenanigans that you can do. You can change the way your units fight on the battlefield. You can be throwing out mortal wounds here, there and everywhere, buffing up some of your units here, cursing enemy units over there. It's a good toolbox, and it's gonna take some time for Thousand Suns players to find out where all the beautiful combos are and what to do when at the right time. It's nice to give the player as many tools as they could possibly play with, they could possibly use throughout the course of a battle, and you've certainly got a shed load of tools here. I like it. Right, let's flip back to the Warlord traits. So Araman has Otherworldly Presence, which is improve your Warlord's invulnerable save by 1 to a maximum of 3-up. Okay, so you don't need to do that psychic power on him. And Magnus the Red has Lord of Forbidden Law, which means your Warlord knows 1 additional psychic power. Now Magnus can still manifest 3 psychic powers and deny 3 psychic powers. He knows 3 from the Discipline of Change and 3 from the Dark Hereticus and or Discipline of Tzeentch list. So essentially you got 3 from one of the drop down boxes there, and up to 3 from the other 2. But with this psychic power, he knows another one. So he knows 7 psychic powers he can play around with, if I'm reading this right. And he can manifest 3 of them. But the way the psychic power thing in the Magnus the Red unit entry is written isn't the clearest. It states he knows the Smite psychic power and 3 psychic powers from the Discipline of Change, comma, Dark Hereticus discipline and or the Discipline of Tzeentch. It's the same for the Demon Prince of Tzeentch. He knows the Smite psychic power and 2 psychic powers from the Discipline of Change, comma, Dark Hereticus and or the Discipline of Tzeentch. Same with Araman. He knows the Smite psychic power and 3 psychic powers from the Discipline of Change and or Dark Hereticus discipline. It's not the most clearly written set of rules when you're looking at these psychers. The way I read it is when it's an and or, when they say Discipline of Change and or Dark Hereticus discipline, they mean a combination up to 3 or up to 2. But with Magnus himself, when they say 1, he knows 3 from this, comma, and then 3 from this and this, or this. I think they mean a combination of up to 3 from those other 2 psychic things. I think that's what it means. I think basically Araman knows 3. I think the Demon Prince knows 2 from the Discipline of Change and or 2 from the Dark Hereticus and Discipline of Tzeentch thing. And I think Magnus knows 3 from the Discipline of Change and or another 3 from Dark Hereticus and Discipline of Tzeentch plus 1 for his Warlord trait. It needs a fact. I was reading it and thinking about it, and I've probably got it wrong. But long story short, they know a lot of psychic powers. The other 4 Warlord traits are reroll failed deny the witch test for your Warlord, reduce all damage suffered by your Warlord by 1 to a minimum of 1. Your Warlord can advance and charge in the same turn and re-roll failed charge rolls. And the last one is add 1 to any psychic tests for your Warlord. There's a couple of very good ones there. The High Magister, add 1 to any psychic tests you take for your Warlord, is great. And your Warlord can advance and charge and re-roll failed charge. The Ether Stride, that one's really good as well. So some good some good Warlord traits to pick from here. Before Stratagems, let's quickly talk about the relics, because there's only 1 page of them, which I found quite surprising. Normally you get a couple of pages, but only 1 page. There are 3 powerful weapons, Seer's Bane, the Coruscator, and the Prismatic Staff. I won't go through all the stats because they're just powerful weapons. However, the Prismatic Staff, which replaces a force stave, allows the bearer to shoot and charge during a turn in which it fell back, which is very nice. So if you gave this to a sorcerer on a disc, for example, because bear in mind you have to have a force stave, you wouldn't be able to throw this one on your Demon of Tzeentch, your Demon Prince of Tzeentch. Yeah, allowing the guy on the disc to shoot and charge in the turn in which he fell back is quite useful, and the prismatic staff is +2 strength, -1 AP, D3 damage. That's a nice little ability there. However, the standout relic is the Dark Matter Crystal, which you can only use once per battle at the end of your movement phase. However, once per battle at the end of your movement phase, you can select the bearer or a friendly Thousand Suns infantry unit only, so Scarab Occult Terminators, something or other, within 12 inches of him. So you pick a unit within 12 inches of the bearer and you remove that unit from the battlefield and immediately set them up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from enemy models, and this does not count as falling back if the unit was within 1 inch of the enemy models. Now, in a game where movement can win and lose you games, anything that allows you to pick up a unit, even if it's in close combat, and move it to the other side of the battlefield for free, and it doesn't count as falling back if the unit was engaged in close combat, is a powerful tool. The Dark Matter Crystal is awesome. I can imagine some Thousand Suns units moving up the battlefield, doing all their shooting, throwing all their dagger down, using some of the stratagems, using some of the psychic powers, going wheeling into combat, using death to the false emperor. And then just as the enemy comes crashing towards them in the enemy turn, when it gets to your turn again, before they get surrounded and get cut off, you can move them to the other side of the battlefield, or just move them 9 inches back if you want to, because it doesn't count as falling back, and you've moved them just 9 inches back, and then you shoot and charge and do all your thing again. We have Helm of the Third Eye, and if your army is battle-forged and the wearer is on the battlefield, each time your opponent uses a stratagem, that's your opponent only, roll a dice, and on a 5-up, you gain a command point. So some stratagems can cost 3 command points. Your opponent uses a command point that costs 2 or 3, uses a stratagem that costs 2 or 3 command points. It doesn't matter how many command points they spend on the stratagem, you just roll 1 die, and on a 5-up, you gain a command point. This will be the relic you want to take if you're playing Guard, because Guard tend to have lots and lots of command points and stratagems to play with. And it's a way of getting command points, right? We all like our command points. And then the last one is the Athenian Scrolls. If you roll a double when making a successful psychic test for your bearer, for the bearer of the Athenian Scrolls, your opponent cannot attempt to resist that psychic power with a deny the witch test or negate it by any means. Note that the psychic will still suffer perils of the warp on a double 1 or double 6, and if slain, the power they were trying to manifest will still automatically fail. So the Athenian Scrolls, you can never resist the psychic power of this dude. Remember, like other relics, you cannot give any of these to named Thousand Suns characters, such as Magnus or Ahriman. They already have their own relics. This is only for your unnamed characters. So only 1 page of relics there, but some very interesting relics. The Dark Matter Crystal, the Helm of the Third Eye, being able to get command points back. It's going to be interesting to see what Thousand Suns players pick. Normally there's one standout one here, but there's a couple in here I quite like the look of. Right, stratagems. What new and exciting tricks can you pull off with your Thousand Suns? Well, there's 3 pages of stratagems. We've already talked about Boon of Tzeentch, and there's Relics of the Thousand Suns. That's the ability to take between extra relics, essentially. These are similar to other things that you would find in other stratagems that you would find in other books. And there's also a good smattering of Chaos Space Marine stratagems in here as well. Stratagems that are also in the Death Guard book, or well, a couple of them are, such as Veterans of the Long War, and Blasphemous Machines, and Line Breaker Bombardment, and Demon Forge. So there's some cut and paste stratagems from the Chaos Space Marines book in here, but ignoring them, jumping into some of the other ones. So the most expensive one that you'll find in here or maybe the cheapest really, because it's 1 or 3 command points, is called Webway Infiltration. Use this stratagem during your deployment. If you spend 1 command point, you can set up 1,000 Suns infantry, only infantry unit, from your army in the webway instead of placing them on the battlefield. And if you spend 3 command points, you can set up 2 such units in the webway instead. And any number of the units in the webway can emerge at the end of any of your movement phases. Set up each unit anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches from enemy models, and you can only use this stratagem once per battle. So even though it isn't used in a particular phase, so you could stratagems that aren't used in a phase you can use more than once. This one specifically states you can only use this once per battle. So you've got a unit of 1,000 Suns infantry. You can stick them in the webway for a point. Out they come at the end of turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. Remember, you've also got warp time, and then you can suddenly move them because they're 9 inches away, right? That's what it says here, webway infiltration. You deep strike them 9 inches away. Then with warp time, you could move them up into flame range, and then you could flame lots and lots of nasty flamers into your enemy army. And I'm specifically thinking of warp flamers here. Remember, any rubric marine can swap his Inferno bolt gun for a warp flamer. And warp flamers are strength 4, -2 AP, 1 damage each. So you can deep strike in, you can move with a warp time spell, and suddenly you're in 8-inch flamer range. Say you got 10 rubric marines, that's 10 times d6, up to 60 auto hits, 10 times d6 hits at strength 4, -2 AP, 1 damage each. Typically wounding space marines on a 4-up. If you want to really get cheeky, spend Veterans of the Long War, and then Veterans of the Long War is +1 to your wound rolls, so you're going to be wounding a unit on a 3-up. This will annihilate most units, absolutely annihilate most units. And if you've got the dark matter crystal as well, and that unit gets in trouble, then you could pick them up and deploy them on the other side of the battle grid once per battle with that dark matter crystal. And of course, after picking them up and deploying them on the other side of the battlefield in your next movement phase. That's what you do in your next movement phase. First movement phase, out they come, move forward, warp flame someone for 10 times d6 shots. Then your opponent goes, probably tries to nail that unit, but you could potentially pick it up, move it to the other side of the battlefield with the dark matter crystal, cast warp time on that unit again, move them forward, and do it all again. Very, very good combination there. Let's talk through some of these other stratagems. So the Great Sorcerer. You select a 1,000 Sun Psyker, and they can attempt to manifest 1 additional psychic power. I'll run through all the 1 warp charge points. So Fire Frenzy, Demon Forge, Kabbalistic Focus for 1 stratagem. Before attempting to manifest a psychic power from your army, from a 1,000 Sun Psyker from your army that's within 6 inches of 2 other friendly 1,000 Sun Psykers, you can add 2 to the psychic test. So you really want to pass that psychic power. Say you want to get a smite off and try and get d6 damage in. You might have that relic that allows you to add 1 to your psychic rolls, where you spend 1 command point and suddenly you're adding another 2 to your psychic rolls. With that relic called the High Magister, sorry, not relic, but Warlord trait, the High Magister, then you're adding 1 to your psychic test as well. So essentially a +3 to your smite if you want to. We have Kill Shot, Blasphemous Machines, Warp Flame Gargoyles. Pick a 1,000 Suns vehicle from your army, but not a Hellbrute or a Helldrake, and roll a d6 for each unit, friend or foe, within 3 inches of it, subtracting 2 from the roll if the unit being rolled for is a character or vehicle. And on a 4-up, the unit being rolled for suffers d3 mortal wounds. Now, Land Raiders and Defilers have a big footprint, so any enemy within 3 inches of them on a 4-up will suffer d3 mortal wounds. That footprint could be reaching out and touching 2-3 units. Yes, on a 4-up, you've got to roll a dice, and on a 4-up, the enemy suffers, or friend suffers d3 mortal wounds. But it's a nice situational one to bring. Chaos Familiar is in there. Sorcerer's Pact. Use this stratagem when a Thousand Suns character attempts to summon a unit of Tzeentch demons. You can roll 4 dice rather than 3. We have Veterans of the Long War. Soul Flare. Use this stratagem when a Thousand Suns aspiring sorcerer or Scarab Occult sorcerer from your army is slain. Before removing the model as a casualty, roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 6 inches of that model, subtracting 2 from the dice roll if the unit being rolled for is a character or a vehicle. And on a 4 up, the unit being rolled for suffers a mortal wound. So your sorcerer dies, or your Scarab Occult sorcerer dies, 6-inch range on a 4 up. Only hurts enemies, this thing does mortal wounds, basically explodes. Fated Mutation. Use this stratagem in the fight phase just before a unit of Tzeentch Chaos spawn from your army fight. And instead of rolling a d3 for mutated beyond reason, you can pick it. Vengeance for Prospero. Use this stratagem just before a Thousand Suns unit from your army fights in the fight phase. Until the end of the phase, that unit's Death to the False Emperor ability triggers on a 4 up instead of a 6 up for attacks that target Space Wolf units only. Just Space Wolf units. The Flesh Change, 1 command point. Use this stratagem at the start of any phase. Pick a Thousand Suns infantry character from your army and that character is slain. But you can add a Chaos Spawn to your army 6 inches away. So say you've got a Thousand Suns sorcerer on 1 wound left. And you can use this stratagem at the start of any phase. So your opponent shoots your Thousand Suns character, your sorcerer, and declares at the start of and is going to charge them in the charge phase. You know they're going to get charged, and you know your sorcerer is going to get wiped out because he's on 1 wound left anyway. And your opponent will be 6 inches or 7 inches or 9 inches closer towards you because they're trying to charge forward. They're trying to not only slay your sorcerer on 1 wound left, but trying to pull themselves further up the battlefield. Well, at the start of that phase, before they declare any charges, you could kill your sorcerer and set up the spawn 6 inches away. You could set it up 6 inches further back. So yes, you've lost your sorcerer, but you might deny that charge so that they can't come further up the battlefield. Or here's another thing for them. Say they've got not overwhelming firepower, that card, that Maelstrom of War card, that says you have to kill stuff in the fight phase. I forget what it is. Or they've got that other Maelstrom of War card, which is just kill everything. They've got objectives, and their objective is to kill stuff. And they've already shot and they've already charged your sorcerer before the start of the fight phase, because it's at the start of any phase. Before they get to fight, you could kill your sorcerer. So they don't kill your sorcerer. You could just remove him and then add a Chaos Spawn to your army 6 inches away, so that unit doesn't fight. A Chaos Spawn created in this manner must have the Tzeentch keyword and does not cost any reinforcement points. Inferno Bolts. Select a Thousand Suns vehicle before the battle. And select a Combi Bolter, Combi Melter, Combi Flamer, Heavy Bolter, or Twin Heavy Bolter. So say a Land Raider. You pick a Land Raider, pick any Thousand Suns vehicle, but a Land Raider's got a Twin Heavy Bolter on it. And that Twin Heavy Bolter suddenly has Inferno Bolts, and that weapon is upgraded to fire Inferno Bolt rounds and has an AP characteristic of -2. Baleful Vortex. Use this stratagem after a Mutalith Vortex beast from your army is resolved a Mutalith Vortex power. Roll a d6 to randomly select a Mutalith Vortex power, and the Mutalith Vortex beast immediately uses the power rolled even if they've already rolled it. So twice on the Mutalith Vortex beast's table. We'll get to that in a bit. Those are all worth 1 command point. For 2 command points, you've got Cycle of Slaughter. Zangor units can immediately fight again after they're fought. Another 2 command points. No, that's it. That is it. There's a 3 command point, one called Coruscating Beam. Use this stratagem in the shooting phase if you have a Thousand Suns Warlord that did not move in your movement phase. This is your Warlord only. Instead of shooting with your Warlord's weapons, this could be a Demon Prince, this could be Araman, this could be whoever you want it to be. It has to be your Warlord. Pick 2 points on the battlefield that are 9 inches apart and visible to him, and draw an imaginary straight 1 millimeter line between them. So he could be on one side of the battlefield on the top of a tower and see the entire battlefield. So long as it's visible to him, he can draw this 9-inch line in any direction he wants to at the other side of the battlefield. And roll a d6 for each unit that the center of the line passes over. Unit. Subtracting 1 from the result if the unit being rolled for is a character. And on a 4-up, the unit being rolled for suffers d3 mortal wounds. You can only use this stratagem once per battle. It's 3 command points, but I'm thinking about guard gun lines. I'm thinking about Tau gun lines. You only need a 4-up, and it is 9 inches long. And if there is a packed gun line, you might be able to touch 3, 4, 5 separate units there, so long as that line goes over some of them. It's very similar to the orbital bombardment stratagem that the Space Marines have. It's pricey, but if you see your opponent packed in there, it might be worth pulling off. It'll certainly be funny if you do manage to pull it off, because it does d3 wounds to everything it touches. Having said all that, there's 2 in here that you're going to use again and again. The 2 standout ones are Webway Infiltration, being able to deep strike a unit of infantry in, and of course Veterans of the Long War. Death Guard can bring it, Chaos Space Marines can bring it. It lasts in the shooting phase or the fight phase, and you add 1 to all wound rolls made for the unit until the end of the phase, and stacked that with Death to the False Emperor if you're fighting Imperium. Veterans of the Long War plus 1 to wound is a go-to stratagem because it's only 1 command point. Right, those are some basic abilities: the psychic powers, relics, warlord traits, and stratagems. Those are the icing on the cake to how your army functions. But now let's have a look at the units themselves. What is the meat made of? Icing of the cake with meat inside. What is the meat and potatoes of your meal? And we've just touched on the vegetables of the meal. I don't know what I'm talking about. So let's jump into the units. The main one is Magnus. Let's talk about Magnus first. He's at the last unit in the book. Normally go through it in order. But Magnus is the only Lord of War in here. Previously was 4-1-5 points. Now he's 4-4-5 points. So he's gone up 30 points. And he has taken a bit of a change. Because previously, I think Primarch of the Thousand Suns rule allowed him and any friendly Thousand Suns units within 9 inches of him to re-roll invulnerable saves of 1. And that has gone. So Magnus is a 4-up invulnerable save. You chuck that spell on him, it gets him a 3-up invulnerable save. And what people were doing was having a 3-up, re-rolling 1 invulnerable save, and that's gone. He doesn't have that anymore, and he doesn't shove it out on units within 9 inches of him. Instead, Primarch of the Thousand Suns still has a 9-inch range, but you can re-roll hit rolls of 1, and any dice rolls of 1 that are made of a part of a psychic test for friendly Thousand Suns units within 9 inches of him. So that's a captain rule, the standard captain rule, or the standard Chaos Lord rule that Chaos Space Marines get. Basically re-rolling hit rolls of 1 within the 9-inch bubble in the fight phase or in the shooting phase. Previously the rule allowed them to be a bit more resilient. It allowed them to re-roll saves of 1, but now it's going to allow 1,000 units to be a bit more killy by re-rolling hit rolls of 1. And it does say any friendly Thousand Suns units. It's not just infantry. This will apply to land raiders, anything. It also, of course, applies to Magnus the Red as well. He has still got a boatload of attacks, 7, 6 or 5, depending on how crippled he is. He still hits on a 2-up. He still has a weapon skill of a 2-up, and his psychic power still hits on a 2-up. But now he's hitting on a 2-up and re-rolling 1s because he's in range of himself. He's Magnus, so it makes Magnus more killy. And remember, it also applies to 1s that are rolled as part of a psychic test for threat-friendly Thousand Suns units. So you're highly unlikely to peril any dice rolls of a 1. So if you roll 2 1s, if you roll Snake Eyes and perils, you can pick them both up and you're highly unlikely to perils again. I think it's a 1 in 36 chance. Or if you roll a 1 and a 3, and you think, damn, I've only got 4, that's not enough for smite, then you can pick up that 1 and roll it again and try and get your smite power off. Unearthly power. Whenever Magnus attempts to deny psychic power, add the bonus shown in his damage table to a psychic test or deny the witch test. I believe he did that before. And Crown of the Kings and King. He has a 4-up invulnerable save. and roll a d6 whenever he suffers a mortal wound as a result of perils of the warp, and on a 2-up, that wound is ignored. So remember, he's re-rolling ones for psychic powers anyway. If you do, for some reason, get perils of the warp, say you roll boxcars, then on a 2-up, Magnus ignores perils of the warp. And Gaze of Magnus. Now this is his super smite. His super smite beforehand was absolutely beef because he did 2d6 mortal wounds on a roll of a 10 or more. But now it says, when he manifests the smite psychic power, he inflicts d6 mortal wounds instead of d3, which is what he did before, and 2d6 mortal wounds instead of d6 if the result of the psychic test is more than 11. So he needs to roll a 12 to do 2d6 mortal wounds. Bear in mind, at full health, he's got +2 to his psychic power. So 10, 11 or 12, and he's popping the 2d6 super smite off. But yeah, it's now more than 11 for the Gaze of Magnus 2d6 super smite. He still knows a boatload of psychic powers, and his stats are still the same. They are still as they were. Toughness 7, 18 wounds, all that shenanigans. The Blade of Magnus is still unchanged, so he still has an absolutely beast of an attack. So he's hitting at strength 16 at -4 AP and 3 damage each. And if a character is destroyed by this weapon, then you can set up a Chaos Spawn within 6 inches of him. So the core of him does the same. The main change is he's not re-rolling ones for invulnerable, but he is re-rolling ones to hit. He is a bit more killy and affecting those units around him, making them a bit more killy. That's Magnus. Now we're going to jump back to the front of the book and talk through some of the other units. Before I dive into the other units, just talk about some of the points briefly while I'm looking at the page. So Ahriman is still the same. A lot of these points are unchanged from the Chaos Space Marine book. Some have gone up as well. So for example, the Sorcerers have actually gone up in points, a few points. Exalted Sorcerer has gone up by about 20 points, and the guy on a disc as well. So if you want to bring Exalted Sorcerers of Tzeentch on a disc, and the Sorcerers and the Sorcerer in Terminator armor, they've all gone up a little bit, which I guess is fair because now they can take a shed load of psychic powers. As for troops, Zangors are the same. Rubric Marines previously were 18 points. They're still 18 points, but you had to pay 30 points for the dude that was in there, the Aspiring Sorcerer. But now the Aspiring Sorcerer is still 18 points. It was 18 points for a whole unit, 18 points each for 1,000 Sun, and 30 points on top if you when you brought the Aspiring Sorcerer. But now it's all 18 points. 18 points a model, regardless of whether there's same points cost for the Aspiring Sorcerer in there as well. And then the biggest drops are for the generic stuff, like the Predator has gone down 12 points, the Vindicator has gone down 35 points. But the biggest drop comes from the Defiler. When you add on the Battle Cannon, Reaper Auto Cannon, Twin Heavy Flamer, Defiler Claws, previously a Defiler, without changing any of the stuff on it, was 258 points. He was quite pricey. But now when you add all the stuff onto him, he's 189 points. He's gone down over 60 points. Almost a 70 point drop there. Forge Fiends and Mauler Fiends are the same. I guess they really want you to get Defilers. But honestly, most things stay around the same points costs. Some have gone up, some have gone down. Rubric Marines being a bit cheaper is nice. Chaos Cultists are 1 point cheaper. That's nice. But just have a look, a good study of those point sections. You're not going to see very many changes there. Magnus has gone up. You're not going to see very many changes there. But watch out because a few have gone up as well as down. Right, the units. Ahriman is still a beast and still a steal for 131 points. And his Lord of the Thousand Suns rule has changed. Most of the stuff here has remained the same. But Lord of the Thousand Suns was reroll invulnerable saving throws of 1. For any 1,000 Suns infantry units within 6 inches of him, just like Magnus, re-rolling that 1. But that has changed to re-roll hit rolls of 1, made for any friendly 1,000 Suns units within 6 inches of Ahriman. So again, just like Magnus, losing some of their resilience, being able to re-roll that 1 for invulnerable saves, but instead rerolling hit rolls of 1 when they're shooting or when they are fighting. You've also got a new ability for Ahriman, which is the Arch Sorcerer of Tzeentch, and he can add 1 to any psychic tests or deny tests that you take for him. He can still manifest 3 psychic powers, he can still deny 3 psychic powers, and again, 131 points, this guy. And he can still put them on a disc, he's an absolute dude. Then the other HQs that you can bring are the Demon Prince of Tzeentch, Exalted Sorcerers, Sorcerer, and Terminator Armor, and that's it. The difference between a Sorcerer and Exalted Sorcerer, I think you guys know, is Sorcerers are cheaper, and they've got a weapon skill, ballistic skill of 3 up and 4 wounds. And Exalted Sorcerers have a weapon skill and ballistic skill of 2 up, and they have 5 wounds. Just for a few more points there. The Demon Prince of Tzeentch comes with Ephemeral Demon. He has a 4 up invulnerable save. You can give him wings, and either the axe, the sword, or the malefic talons, just like the other types of demon princes you can get for other Chaos Space Marine forces. And he can attempt to manifest 2 psychic powers, and he can attempt to deny 1 psychic power, and he's a Prince of Tzeentch, so you can reroll hit rolls of 1 made for any 1,000 Suns and any Tzeentch demon units within 6 inches of this model. So if you're mixing and matching your Tzeentch demons, then this is the guy that allows you to re-roll those hit rolls of 1 for Tzeentch demons. Because remember, Magnus doesn't do it, Ahriman doesn't do it, but this guy does. And demon princes with wings are beef, particularly ones that can cast 2 psychic powers with a 4 up invulnerable save. Yeah, and he knows psychic powers from all of the 3 psychic lists there. There's 18 powers for him to pick from, basically. And you could chuck a relic on him if you want to make him super beef. Right, Exalted Sorcerers, just like Ahriman, had that re-roll invulnerable saves of 1, but just like Ahriman and Magnus, you re-roll hit rolls of 1 made for friendly 1,000 Suns units within 6 inches of this model. What I'm saying is there's no more re-rolling invulnerable saves of 1. Wherever that rule applied in the past, it's now re-rolling hit rolls of 1. So if you brought the same army along, they'd be a little less resilient and a lot more killy. Right, moving on to the troops section. There's 4 flavors of troops: Rubric Marine, Zangors, Chaos Cultists, and Horrors. Horrors are demons, but they don't have the 1,000 Suns keyword, so you're going to want to put them in a different detachment. Cultists, Zangors, and Rubric Marines do. Rubric Marines still have Death to the False Emperor. They still have All is Dust, which is very nice. And they still have Vavid as Tzeentch. They still have their 5 up invulnerable save. They still have access to all the crazy -2 AP toys that they had before. So Rubric Marines, 18 points each, very killy. The Psyker in there, the Aspiring Sorcerer, can attempt to manifest 1 psychic power in each friendly psychic phase, deny 1. He knows Smite, and he knows 1 psychic power from the Discipline of Change. As before, when he smites, he only does 1 mortal wound unless he gets more than 10 for his psychic test. So you roll 2 dice, and if he gets 11 or 12, then he can do D3 mortal wounds. But typically they just do 1 wound when they smite, just like Grey Knights. It would be a bit much if you had 5 units of Rubric Marines running around all over the place, smiting all the time. You just annihilate your opponent. Zangors have a new little thing called a Brayhorn. Apart from this, they're unchanged from before, but a Brayhorn, add 1 to advance and charge rolls for a unit that includes a Brayhorn. Chaos Cultists are Chaos Cultists, and Horrors are the new flavor of Chaos Horrors that you would find, the Horrors that you find in the Chaos Demons book. So their ephemeral form and their split ability follows the rules from the Chaos Demons book. After troops, we have 4 flavors of elite. We have the Zangor Shaman, Flamers, Scarab Gold Terminators, and Hellroots. Now the Zangor Shaman is a Psyker. He knows 1 psychic power, and he can smite, and he knows 1 psychic power from the Discipline of Change. He's still a puny Zangor. He only has his 6 up save, but this guy's got a 5 up invulnerable save as well. He is a 1,000 Sun. He does have that keyword, so he can benefit from being in a 1,000 Suns detachment. and he allows you to reroll any hit rolls of 1 that you make for friendly Zangor units within 6 inches of him. So he makes your Zangors a bit more killy. And you can always re-roll the first failed psychic test you make for this model. This ability can only be used once per battle, called Sorcerer's Elixir. So he keeps rolling the psychic test, keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. And when he fails one, you can re-roll that one for free, Sorcerer's Elixir. So that's quite nice. He's a cheap psyker. He's got 4 wounds. He's got a movement of 12 because he's flying around on a disc. He's a character, so he can't be targeted. And he's a psyker that knows smite. He's basically a very cheap way of bringing a psyker in. And when I say cheap, he's 82 points. 82 points for a 4 wound model with a 6-up save and a 5-up in Vun, but he can't be targeted and he moves 12 and he's smiting out all over the place. You're going to be bringing him if you're bringing Zangors. But I mean, why wouldn't you bring him along if you've got a Vanguard detachment? Vanguard detachment is the 3 elite one, right? Why not bring a sorcerer along and 5 Zangors for 82 points, zipping around in the backfield, smiting away. They know the discipline of change power. They have the Thousand Suns keyword, so the range of their psychic powers will be increased by 6 inches in a Battleforged detachment. They can know Doombolt or temporal manipulation, healing D3 wounds, or that boon and mutation, getting free boons out on people. Zangor Shaman, I like it. After that, we have the demon entry in the elite slot, which is Flamers. The Flamers are cut and pasted from the Demons, Chaos Demons Codex. They don't have the Thousand Suns keyword. And then we have Scarab Occult Terminators and Hellbrutes. A Hellbrute is a Hellbrute. It's unchanged, but he might be useful in the Thousand Suns list because Thousand Suns, pure Thousand Suns, suffer from long-range DACA unless they bring Land Raiders, Predators, Defilers, things like that. Hellbrute are a chance to put las cannons or Reaper cannons on them, and your way of reaching out and touching something on the other side of the battlefield. So Hellbrutes are Hellbrutes. Then Scarab Occult Terminators are still cool. They still have their 5-up invulnerable save and all is dust rule, and you can still teleport them onto the battle grid. They are still 33 points per model, just as before, but again, like with the Rubik Marines, you don't need to pay extra for the Scarab Occult Sorcerer. He was 50 points, but now he'll just be 33 points. He's the same cost as the Scarab Occult Terminator. They've lost that entry. Apart from that, they are unchanged. They are doing what they do. They've got their psychic power shenanigans, they're deep striking in, and they are very, very mean. Still some of the slowest units in the game though, with a movement value of 4. They stumble around like Nurgle Terminators. Anyway, fast attack. There's only 3 in the fast attack. Zangor Enlightened, Chaos Spawner and Screamers. We know what Chaos Spawner and Screamers do, but what's this Zangor Enlightened fast attack guy? And they're basically Zangors that zip around on discs all over the place. They've got a movement characteristic of 12. And 2 wounds because they're on a disc, and their normal 6-up save, so they're weak, but they do have Aura of Dark Glory, just like the Shaman guys zipping around on a disc. These guys have a 5-up invulnerable save. So what you've got here is a unit of up to 6 enlightened. So yeah, a unit of 3 to 9, a unit of 3 to 9 Zangors zipping around on a disc. So 2 flavors of Zangors in this book. The ones on foot, the ones zipping around on discs. The ones on discs have some saves to them and move a very long way, movement 12. Having that movement ability in a game where movement is king, where a game where movement gets you to objectives, gets you to where you want to be, ties up units, allows you to screen units, is very, very useful. They all have Divining Spears, which are +1 strength. So these are strength 5, and the guys themselves have got 2 attacks each. The Aviarch has got 3 attacks each, and they hit on 3s. So these guys come flying in, hitting on 3s, strength 5, -1 to hit. And the damage of this weapon is increased from 1 to 2 on the turn they charge. And every time you make a hit roll of a 6 for the model in the unit, you don't have to roll a wound, it automatically wounds. So they are quite pokey as well, the Zangor Enlightened. And they're 15 points each. Yes, they've got a 6-up save and a 5-up in Vun, and that's it. But 2 wounds, toughness 4, movement 12, zipping around all over the place. They could be a problem, and they're cheap. And they look pretty cool. The models look pretty cool. There's pictures of them somewhere scrolling through your screen. Chaos Spawn Screamers, we talked about that. Now in the heavy slot, you've got lots and lots and lots of heavies. So we have Mauler Fiends, Forge Fiends, Defilers, Chaos Land Raiders, Chaos Vindicators, Chaos Predator, and the Mutalith Vortex Beasts. And all of these have the Thousand Suns keyword, so it can be taken in a Battleforged attachment without breaking that rule. And I think we know what Predators, Vindicators, Land Raiders, Forge Fiends, Mauler Fiends, Defilers do. They're essentially saying bring some vehicles. You can either do the foot slogging Rubric Marine list, but it's probably worth rounding out your army with some of the vehicles here for long range Dakar. Defilers, unfortunately, ballistic skill is low because they would be my go-to with their 5-up invulnerable save and your ability to increase it to a 4-up invulnerable save. But as soon as they move, then they're hitting on a 5 again. Defilers aren't as great as I think they would be. But I do like the idea of putting some Mauler Fiends potentially in a Thousand Suns list and charging these guys forward with their Lasher Tendrils on and increasing their 5-up invuln to a 4-up invuln. I think that could work. Chaos Predators work well in any Chaos Space Marine or Space Marine list for that matter. Maybe they'll work particularly well in a Thousand Suns list because there are no Havocs in this book. There's no stand at the back infantry shoot unit. If you want your long range firepower, you are bringing a Forge Fiend, a Chaos Land Raider, a Predator or a Defiler. That's it. So out of them, your Chaos Predators, either the Tri-Las Predator or the Autocannon Las Predator variation. Throwing down some firepower, and remember with Exalted Sorcery it's probably worth keeping one back there with them so that they're re-rolling hit rolls of 1, hitting on 3s, re-rolling hit rolls of 1, and if anyone comes near, you've got a sorcerer back there who can smite and do some damage to you. And then you have this Mutalith Vortex Beast. So this is a unit that has jumped over from Age of Sigmar. I think we saw this in that other book. What was that other book with the thing that jumped over? Some giant snail in the Chaos Demons book. Well, the Mutalith Vortex Beast was in Age of Sigmar, and now it's in 40k, and it's 150 points. And it's Strength 7, Toughness 7, 14 wounds with a 5-up invulnerable save and a 4-up save. It's got a weapon skill of 4, ballistic skill of 4, but it isn't particularly... It's got 4, 3 or 2 attacks depending on how crippled it is, but it's not something you really want to shoot with. It's not something you really want to assault with. It's 14 wounds, 4-up save, 5-up invuln. It's something you leave in the middle of your army and pull off its warp vortex. It's a big beast with a big warp stormy thing over the top of it, and it is a buffer. It's mainly a buffer. So let's run through what it does, and you can see how it might affect your army. On your screen now is a picture of a Mutalith Vortex Beast. 150 points, it's a heavy, so you can bring 3, 5 of these guys in a battalion detachment. And it has mutant regeneration, and it gains 1 wound at the start of each turn, and it has a warp vortex. So at the start of each of your shooting phases, you may have this model attempt to use a single Mutalith Vortex power, and you can pick from the table below single power. Alternatively, you may randomly determine the power by rolling a d6, and if you do so, you may attempt a second randomly determined power after immediately resolving the first. Each time the model attempts to use one of its powers, roll a dice, and if it's successful if the result is equal or greater than the vortex power characteristic shown in the damage table. So when it's uninjured, it will pull off these basically you can pick all the time. It doesn't matter how injured he is, you can pick a power once a turn, and that's it, done. Next turn you can pick a power once, done. Or you can roll, and if you roll, you have to consult the vortex power. When he's uninjured, you roll, and so long as you get a 2-up, he will pull off a power, or she will. On a 4 to 7 wounds, it's a 3-up, and on a 1 to 3 wounds, it's a 4-up. So what I'm saying is, when he or she is uninjured, you're just rolling and trying to get higher than a 2-up. When it's injured, you're probably just picking 1 power. That will guarantee you get the power that you want. It does say that if it attempts to use the power and the power fails because you get below the dice roll, then nothing happens. Nothing bad happens. However, if the model has 7 or fewer wounds remaining at the start of your shooting phase, the ranges of the vortex powers are doubled. So the lesser wounds it has, the range is doubled. However, it'll suffer a mortal wound if you roll a 1 when he attempts to use a power. So again, when it's weak, don't roll, just pick something, double range. And then you won't suffer those mortal wounds. It also has a warp implosion. When it goes bye-bye, it will blow up on a 6, and it doesn't do D3 mortal wounds to things within 6 inches. It does D6 mortal wounds to things within 6 inches of it, friend or foe. So you don't want this thing blowing up in your lines. Anyway, what do these warp powers do? Remember, it's double this range if it's on less than 7, with 7 or less wounds. So warp flare, number 1 is warp flare. Each enemy unit within 9 inches of it suffers a mortal wound. Every enemy unit within 9 inches, 1 mortal wound. That's an 18-inch bubble there, warp flare. Chaotic infusion, pick a Tzeentch unit from your army, any Tzeentch unit. Add 1 to that unit's strength characteristic until the end of your turn. So Magnus suddenly getting very strong. He's suddenly going up to strength 9 with his weapon. It's a strength 18 hit. Or Rubric Marines or Scarab Occult Terminator suddenly going up from strength 4 to strength 5. And you pick, remember, it says pick a Tzeentch unit from your army within 9 inches of him, and you add 1 to their strength. Remember, this thing is a buffer. 3, pick a Tzeentch unit within 9 inches of your army. You can re-roll failed charge rolls. If the unit is already within 1 inch of an enemy unit, they fight first, as if they're charged. 4, ephemeral touch. Pick a Tzeentch unit from your army within 9 inches of the Vortex Beast and improve the AP of all melee weapons by that unit by 1. For example, a weapon with an AP of 0 will have an AP of -1. Maelstrom of Madness, pick an enemy unit within 9 inches and reduce the leadership characteristic by 1. This is cumulative with other uses of this power to a maximum of -3. So if you had 3 Vortex Beasts and you really wanted to nerf someone's leadership, you could just pick this ability. 9 inches away, the enemy unit is reduced by 1, and then do it again with the second Vortex Beast, and then do it again with the third Vortex Beast, and reduce their leadership down and down and down. And then 6 is Beam of Unreality. Roll 3 dice. For each roll of a 4 up, the closest enemy unit within 18 inches of him or her immediately suffers 1 mortal wound. So, long story short, on a dice roll or a pick of a 1 or a 6, there's the ability to hurt the enemy with mortal wounds. Only 1, but the number 1 is every enemy unit within 9 inches. And on a 2, 3, 4, you buff Tzeentch units, and on a 5, you affect the enemy leadership. Now, when I first read this, I thought, this isn't great, is it? That big swirling warp stormy thing on its back. Wouldn't it be better if it was just a massive laser beam? I get the idea of the randomness of it, so why not turn it into a big shooty gun? It doesn't have to do mortal wounds. You roll a dice and it's like 4 las cannons. You roll another dice and it's like 18 heavy bolters. Maybe not 18 heavy bolters, but 18 heavy bolter shots. And you could still have that warp vortex roar, which allows you to either pick 1 and do it once or roll twice above its vortex power. But I guess they didn't want that type of shooty going on. I guess they didn't want it to just be another thing that sits on the battlefield and shoots. I guess it also, if they did that, it would be samey, right? It would be a 14 wounds, toughness 7 tank, essentially. It would look like a beast, but essentially it would function like a tank. And this way, I've thought about it, this way I think it's something very unique to the Thousand Suns. They've got this big, tough unit that's on the table. That is a buffy unit that doesn't particularly pose an immediate threat to the enemy army, because it's only got a small number of attacks, and its AEP attacks are only, well, it's got the be tentacled maw, and you make 3 hit rolls for each attack made with this weapon. So on full health, that is, instead of 1, on full health it's got 4 attacks. So 3 times 4 is 12 attacks. with that bit be tentacled more. But these 12 attacks are hitting on 4s. It's only -1 AP and it is 1 damage each. It's not that crazy in close combat. It would hurt something weak, but everything hurts something weak. I guess they figured what they'll do is put in something that's different, something that's a buffer, something that will function differently and only function in Thousand Suns lists. I'm sure there's certain ways of playing it that Thousand Suns players will discover and love. Moving this thing up the battlefield because it moves 8 inches at the start and then suddenly re-rolling charge range, something popping out of the webway maybe, or occult terminators, scarab occult terminators teleporting in and re-rolling charges and then fighting first. Yeah, there's some combinations here that if you pull them off or if you pick them will work very well, but it would take a bit more study to figure out how to pull this thing off. It's not just a big shooty tank. It's a force multiplier, and how to make it sing is basically going to be up to you guys. It's basically going to be up to the community. There'll be someone out there who knows how to make it sing, maybe, or they won't sell a lot of them. So after the heavies, we have Chaos Rhinos. That's your only dedicated transport, and then we have the only flyer, which is the Helldrake. All of these units are found in other editions, other codexes, and then at the very end we have Magnus. So I think I have splashed my way across all of these pages, splashed my mind and my thoughts through this book, and it's good. It's good. There's definitely some combinations in here. There's definitely some horrible things you can do in deployment. Rubric Marines are still mean with their 5-up and vulnerable save and Warp Flame -2 AP. Daka. There are combinations of lists in here. There is definitely the foot slogging list, which has got your Marines in it. But you're probably now going to want to put Zangors in it, and those disc Zangors flying around all over the place to give you some much needed speed. A vehicle heavy Thousand Suns list, however, will look like a Chaos Space Marine heavy vehicle heavy list. There is no unique Thousand Suns vehicles in here, unlike the Death Guard book. The Death Guard have those mephitic blight haulers, they have fetid bloat drones, they have plague burst crawler tanks. So you could bring a vehicle heavy Death Guard list that looks uniquely Death Guard. And you can't necessarily bring a vehicle heavy Thousand Suns list that looks uniquely Thousand Suns, apart from the fact that it's painted blue. However, if you're doing Thousand Suns with a lot of vehicles, you're probably doing it wrong. Instead, you need your bodies, you need your infantries, you need your demon princes, because you get a lot of psychers. And that's where this book shines. This book shines in its 18 psychic powers that you can pick. And the number of sorcerers, or Zangor shamans, or the aspiring guys, the scarab occult sorcerers you can bring a lot of sorcerers in a Thousand Suns list, and you will be able to dominate the psychic phase, or maybe Eldar. No, these guys probably. The Eldar got a lot of psychic powers as well, but these guys can bring more. They can bring more psychers. So very, very, very interesting. I'm going to shut up. I've been going a long time. I'm worried about how long this video might be. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for Games Workshop for sending the book through. Thank you to all my patrons for helping to support me. I will see you in the Patreon chat rooms, and I'm sure we'll have a good discussion about the Thousand Suns Codex. Thank you everyone else for listening. Happy wargaming.